Marcus Reed thought he knew exactly why Claire Whitmore invited him to her exclusive country club, to humiliate him in front of her wealthy friends and remind him of his place as just the hired help. But when the crowd began treating him with unexpected respect, Claire's cruel plan backfired spectacularly, forcing her to confront the ugly truth about herself and the privileged world she'd always known. What started as a twisted game of social manipulation would ignite a forbidden romance that threatened to destroy everything they thought they understood about love, class, and the price of choosing your heart over your reputation. But when a single photograph surfaces online, their secret connection becomes public scandal, and both Marcus and Claire must decide if their growing feelings are worth risking everything: their careers, their families, and their safety. The battle lines are drawn, powerful enemies are circling, and someone is about to learn that in the world of high society, love doesn't conquer all, or does it? If you're watching this story unfold, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know if you think Marcus and Claire's love can survive what's coming next. The morning sun caught the chrome on Marcus Reed's cleaning cloth as he worked over the sleek black SUV. Each movement was careful and practiced. He'd been detailing cars since he was 16, but this job at the Whitmore estate paid better than anything he'd found before. The work was steady, the family mostly kept their distance, and he could save money while he figured out his next steps. Marcus stepped back to check his work on the passenger door when he heard voices coming from the main house. Claire Whitmore walked across the circular driveway with 3 friends trailing behind her. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore the kind of casual clothes that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Morning, Marcus," she called out with a bright smile that seemed a little too sharp around the edges. "Good morning, Miss Whitmore." He kept his voice professional and pleasant, like always. Oliver Dane, who'd been hanging around the estate more often lately, leaned against the stone pillar with his arms crossed. Marcus had noticed how Oliver looked at him, like he was measuring something he didn't quite trust. "We're heading to Green Harbor Country Club tomorrow for their spring golf event," Claire said, pulling out her phone. "I had the most wonderful idea." Her friends, Sienna and Paige, giggled at something Marcus couldn't hear. He continued polishing, keeping half his attention on their conversation. "You should come with us, Marcus," Claire said, her fingers flying over her phone screen. "It'll be fun. You can see how the other half lives." Marcus's hand stilled on the cloth. The invitation felt wrong somehow, though he couldn't put his finger on why. There was something in Claire's tone that made his stomach tighten. "That's very kind of you, Miss Whitmore, but I'll be working tomorrow." "Oh, but you work for us," she said with a laugh. "And I'm asking you to come. It's settled then." Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced down to see Claire's name on the screen. "Golf day tomorrow at Green Harbor. 12:30 pickup. Dress casual but nice. Trust me, it'll be educational." CW. The word educational sat heavy in his chest. Marcus looked up to find Claire watching him with that same too-bright smile. Her friends were whispering to each other now, stealing glances in his direction. "I appreciate the invitation," Marcus said carefully. "I'll be ready at 12:30. "Perfect." Claire clapped her hands together. "This is going to be so much fun." As the group walked back toward the house, Marcus heard Oliver's voice carry across the driveway. "You sure about this, Claire? People are going to talk." "That's exactly the point," Claire replied, and her laughter felt like broken glass. Marcus stared down at his phone, reading the message again. Something cold settled in his stomach. He'd grown up learning to read between the lines, to catch the subtle shifts in tone that meant trouble was coming. This invitation wasn't kindness. It was something else entirely. The side door of the house opened, and Evan Whitmore stepped out. Claire's younger brother was 22, but carried himself like someone much older, weighted down by invisible burdens. His hands shook slightly as he walked, something Marcus had noticed before, but never mentioned. "Hey, Marcus," Evan said, his voice soft. "Sorry about my sister. She gets these ideas sometimes." "It's fine," Marcus said, though they both knew it wasn't. Evan glanced back toward the house, then moved closer to the car. "You don't have to go, you know. I could tell her you're sick or something." Marcus appreciated the offer, but backing down felt worse than facing whatever Claire had planned. "I'll be all right. The club crowd can be—" Evan searched for the right word. "Intense, especially when they smell fresh blood." "Is that what I am?" Evan's smile was sad and knowing. "To them?" "Yeah, probably." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Marcus had always liked Evan. The young man treated him like a person, not furniture that happened to speak. "My hands are acting up again," Evan said, holding them out. The tremor was slight but constant. "Big family dinner tonight, and I'm dreading it." Marcus set down his cloth and turned to face Evan fully. "You remember what I taught you about breathing? The 4-count thing? That's it. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. But here's the trick. Focus on your feet. Feel them on the ground. Let the earth hold you up instead of trying to hold yourself." Evan nodded and closed his eyes. Marcus watched as the young man's breathing slowed and deepened. After a minute, Evan's hands were steadier. "Better?" "Yeah, thanks." Evan opened his eyes. "You're good at this. Calming people down, I mean." "Had to learn early." They were interrupted by the sound of heels clicking on stone. Claire appeared around the corner, car keys jangling in her hand. "Marcus, I need you to run some errands for me," she said, her earlier playfulness replaced by businesslike efficiency. "Of course, Miss Whitmore." As Marcus opened the driver's door, Claire slid into the passenger seat. Her perfume was expensive and strong, the kind that announced itself before she even entered a room. "You know, you could call me Claire," she said as they pulled out of the driveway. "We're not that formal around here." "I prefer to keep things professional, Miss Whitmore." She was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the tree-lined street. "You don't trust me." It wasn't a question, so Marcus didn't treat it like one. He kept his eyes on the road and his hands steady on the wheel. "Smart," Claire said finally. "Most people trust me too easily. It usually doesn't work out well for them." Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror, trying to read her expression. There was something vulnerable in her voice that hadn't been there before, but he'd learned not to trust moments like these. Vulnerability could be performed just as easily as cruelty. They spent the next hour running Claire's errands, picking up dry cleaning, stopping by the florist, collecting a package from an expensive boutique. Marcus stayed in the car for most of it, watching people walk by on the sidewalk. This part of town was all clean windows and perfect landscaping, the kind of place where problems were hidden behind polite smiles and generous donations. When they returned to the estate, Marcus parked in his usual spot by the garage. Claire didn't get out immediately. "Tomorrow's going to be interesting," she said. "I'm sure it will be." "You really don't like me, do you?" The question caught him off guard. Marcus turned to look at her directly for the first time since they'd gotten in the car. Her mask had slipped just enough to show something real underneath. Something that looked almost like loneliness. "I don't know you well enough to like or dislike you, Miss Whitmore, but I respect you as my employer." Claire laughed, but it wasn't the sharp sound from earlier. This laugh was hollow. Respect. Right. She got out of the car and walked toward the house without another word. Marcus watched her go, noting the way her shoulders had sagged slightly, how her confident stride had turned into something smaller. That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment with a frozen dinner and tried to figure out what he'd gotten himself into. The text invitation was still on his phone. Those 2 words, "Trust me," feeling more ominous by the hour. He'd worked for wealthy families before, had seen how they treated people like him. Sometimes it was outright cruelty, but more often it was this: the casual use of other people's dignity for entertainment. The invitation to the country club felt like a setup, but he couldn't see the full shape of it yet. Marcus pulled out his good clothes and laid them on the bed. A navy button-down shirt, khakis that he'd pressed carefully, leather shoes that he'd saved up to buy. Nothing fancy, but clean and respectable. If Claire wanted to make a spectacle of him, at least he'd give her nothing to criticize about his appearance. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister in Chicago. "How's the fancy job going? You dealing with rich people drama yet?" Marcus stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Something like that. I'll call you this weekend." He set the phone aside and tried to focus on a book, but the words blurred together. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. All he could do was show up with dignity and deal with whatever Claire Whitmore had planned. Outside his window, the evening light was fading into dusk. Somewhere across town, the Whitmore family was probably having their dinner, making conversation about things that mattered to them. Tomorrow, for reasons he still didn't fully understand, he'd be stepping into their world. Marcus had learned early in life that some invitations were gifts and others were tests. The trick was figuring out which was which before it was too late to walk away. As he turned off the light and tried to sleep, he had the sinking feeling that tomorrow would teach him exactly what kind of invitation Claire Whitmore had really offered. The next morning came too quickly. Marcus dressed carefully, checking his reflection one last time before heading to the estate. The spring air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of blooming dogwoods and fresh-cut grass. On any other day, it would have felt like hope. Today, it felt like the calm before a storm. He arrived at the estate to find the black SUV already pulled up to the front steps. Claire and Evan were waiting by the entrance, both dressed in what Marcus assumed was country club casual, clothes that looked effortlessly expensive. "Right on time," Claire said as he approached. She was wearing a pale yellow sundress and pearls, looking every inch the perfect daughter of privilege. Evan gave Marcus a small nod that seemed to say, "Good luck." The young man's hands were steadier this morning, but his eyes carried worry. "Beautiful day for golf." Oliver's voice came from behind them. He emerged from the house with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Though I have to say, Claire, this is an interesting guest list you've put together." "Life's more fun with surprises," Claire replied, sliding into the back seat next to her brother. Marcus held the door for them, then walked around to the driver's seat. As they pulled away from the estate, Oliver's red sports car fell in behind them. Marcus could see him in the rearview mirror, already talking animatedly on his phone. "You ever been to Green Harbor before, Marcus?" Claire asked from the back seat. "No, ma'am." "It's very old-fashioned, traditional. Some might say it's stuck in the past, but I think it has character." Evan shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Claire." "What?" "I'm just preparing him for the atmosphere." Marcus kept his attention on the road, but he could feel the tension building in the car like humidity before a thunderstorm. Whatever Claire had planned, it was starting now. His phone rang through the car's speakers. Oliver's name appeared on the dashboard display. "Answer it," Claire said. "We're all friends here." Marcus hesitated, then pressed the answer button. "Hello? Marcus, my man." Oliver's voice filled the car, falsely jovial. "Looking forward to seeing how you handle yourself today. Country clubs can be tricky places for people who aren't familiar with the culture. I'm sure it'll be fine, Marcus replied evenly. Oh, I'm sure it will be. Claire's got such interesting ideas about mixing different worlds. Very progressive of her. The word progressive dripped with mockery. Marcus caught Evan's wince in the rearview mirror. See you there, Oliver, Claire said, and Marcus ended the call. The rest of the drive passed in silence. Marcus navigated through increasingly expensive neighborhoods until they reached the gates of Green Harbor Country Club. The entrance was all stone and wrought iron, designed to look welcoming while making it clear that not everyone was welcome. A valet approached as they pulled up to the circular drive. Marcus hesitated for a moment. Was he supposed to hand over the keys like any other guest, or was this part of whatever test Claire had arranged? Just park it yourself, Claire said quietly, seeming to read his uncertainty. We'll meet you at the entrance. Marcus found a spot in the member parking area, checking his appearance one more time in the side mirror. His reflection looked calm and composed, giving no hint of the unease churning in his stomach. The club's entrance was impressive, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, with oil paintings of stern-looking men in golf attire lining the walls. Members moved through the space with the easy confidence of people who belonged, their voices carrying the particular accent of old money and older traditions. Claire and Evan were waiting for him just inside the door. Other members had gathered in small groups, their conversation polite and measured. Marcus noticed how their eyes followed him as he crossed the room. Everyone, Claire said, her voice carrying clearly across the space. I'd like you to meet Marcus Reed. He works for our family, and I thought it would be fun to show him how we spend our Friday afternoons. The introduction landed like a stone in still water. Conversations paused, glasses stopped halfway to lips, and Marcus felt every eye in the room settle on him. Claire's smile was bright and expectant, like she was waiting for something specific to happen. This was it, then. This was the moment she'd been building toward. Marcus stood straighter, meeting the gazes that found him without flinching. If Claire wanted to turn him into a spectacle, he wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing him break. Pleasure to meet you all, he said simply. And then something unexpected happened. Instead of the snickers or uncomfortable silence he'd been expecting, a few people nodded politely. An older woman smiled and said, "Welcome to Green Harbor." A man in a golf sweater asked if he played. Claire's smile flickered for just a moment, like she'd been expecting a different reaction. Marcus saw the confusion cross her face before she recovered her composure. "Let's head out to the practice area," she said. "I'm sure Marcus would love to see the course." As they walked through the club toward the back terrace, Marcus caught snippets of conversation. Nothing cruel or cutting, just the normal chatter of people enjoying their afternoon. It wasn't the hostile reception Claire seemed to have anticipated. The practice green stretched out behind the clubhouse, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens. Members were scattered across the area, some putting, others chatting in small groups. Golf carts hummed quietly along paved paths, and the whole scene had an air of peaceful prosperity. "Quite a view," Marcus said, because someone needed to break the silence. "Yes," Claire replied, though she sounded distracted. "It really is." Evan had moved toward one of the practice carts, his hands hovering uncertainly over the controls. Marcus noticed the tremor starting up again and moved closer. "You all right there?" "These things make me nervous," Evan admitted. "I always feel like I'm going to hit someone or drive into a tree." Marcus examined the cart's controls. They were simple enough, but he could see how they might intimidate someone with shaky hands. "Mind if I take a look?" As Marcus checked the cart's throttle and steering, he heard footsteps approaching. A man in his late 40s with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes walked over. wearing the polo shirt and khakis that seemed to be the unofficial uniform of golf professionals. "Having trouble with that cart?" the man asked. "I'm Luis Ortega, head pro here. Let me know if you need any help." "Just checking the throttle sensitivity," Marcus replied. "My friend here has some hand issues, and I want to make sure it's not too touchy." Luis nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking. These newer electrics can be jumpy if you're not used to them." He adjusted a small dial near the steering wheel. "There, that should smooth it out." Marcus helped Evan settle into the driver's seat and guided him through the basic controls. "Remember what we practiced with breathing. Feel your feet. Let the earth hold you up." Evan took a deep breath and slowly pressed the accelerator. The cart moved forward smoothly, and his face lit up with relief. "Nice work," Luis said to Marcus. "You've got a good touch with people." "Thank you." "You play golf yourself?" "A little. Just the public range over in Seaview when I get time." Luis's eyebrows went up. "Seaview? I know that place. Good facility. Old school teaching methods." He studied Marcus with new interest. "You should stop by our practice area sometime. Always happy to work with someone who takes the game seriously." Marcus felt a warm flush of pride at the professional recognition. But before he could respond, Claire appeared at his elbow. "Marcus, this is all very sweet, but we should really get started with our round." There was something sharp in her voice that made Luis glance between them curiously. "Of course. Enjoy your afternoon, folks." As the pro walked away, Marcus caught Claire watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The plan she'd had for this afternoon was clearly not going the way she'd expected, and he wasn't sure if that was good or bad for him. "Well," she said finally, "this is turning out to be quite educational after all." But now the word educational sounded different than it had in her text message, less like a threat and more like a surprise she hadn't seen coming. The afternoon was just getting started, and Marcus had the feeling that whatever Claire had intended to teach him, she might be the one learning something instead. The first tee area buzzed with quiet activity as foursomes organized themselves for the afternoon round. Marcus stayed close to Evan, helping the young man feel comfortable with the golf cart, while Claire spoke with other members. The sun was warm, but not oppressive, and a light breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass across the course. "You're really good at this," Evan said, as Marcus showed him how to position his feet for better balance. "The calming thing, I mean. Most people just tell me to relax, like that's helpful." "Relaxing isn't something you can force," Marcus replied. "It's something you allow." Oliver appeared beside them with his usual confident stride, carrying a set of expensive-looking clubs. "Getting some lessons, Evan? That's smart. Though I have to say, Marcus, it's interesting seeing you take charge like this. Very assertive." The comment hung in the air like smoke. Marcus recognized the challenge in Oliver's tone, but chose not to take the bait. "Just trying to help," he said simply. "Of course." Oliver's smile was all teeth. "Though I hope you understand that some of our members might find it unusual, seeing someone in your position, acting so familiar with club guests." Evan's jaw tightened. "Oliver, don't—" "It's fine," Marcus said quietly. He looked directly at Oliver, his voice calm and steady. "I understand my position perfectly. I'm here as Miss Whitmore's guest, and I plan to conduct myself appropriately." For a moment, the two men stared at each other. Oliver seemed to be waiting for Marcus to back down or show some sign of discomfort. When neither happened, his smile became forced. "Well then," Oliver said, "I suppose we'll see how things go." As Oliver walked away, Evan let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry about him. He's been like this ever since Claire started, I don't know, questioning things." "What kind of things?" Evan glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Their whole arrangement, the expectation that they'll end up together because their families think it makes sense. Claire's been pushing back more lately. Marcus absorbed this information quietly. It added another layer to Claire's behavior that he hadn't considered. Maybe bringing him here wasn't just about entertainment. Maybe it was about rebellion. "Heads up," Evan said. "Here comes trouble." A golf bag's strap had broken on a nearby cart, spilling clubs across the cart path. The owner, a red-faced man in his 60s, was cursing under his breath while trying to gather his equipment. Marcus walked over without thinking about it. "Need some help?" "Damn strap just gave out," the man muttered. "These things cost a fortune, and they can't even make a decent carrying case." Marcus examined the broken strap. The leather had simply worn through at the stress point. He pulled a small zip tie from his pocket, something he always carried for quick repairs, and threaded it through the strap loops. "This should hold you for the day," he said, testing the makeshift repair. "But you'll want to get it properly fixed before your next round." The man straightened up, looking surprised. "Well, I'll be damned. That's clever thinking." He extended his hand. "Bob Richardson, thanks for the help." "Marcus Reed, happy to help." As they shook hands, Marcus noticed other members watching the interaction. A caddy who'd been struggling to lift a heavy bag caught his eye and nodded approvingly. A woman adjusting her golf shoes smiled in his direction. "You're handy to have around," Bob said. "Claire's lucky to have someone so resourceful working for her family." The comment was meant as a compliment, but it reminded Marcus of his actual position here. He was the help, invited along for reasons that were still unclear to him. The brief moment of feeling like he belonged evaporated. "Thank you, sir," he said, stepping back. Claire appeared at his side, having observed the entire interaction. "Marcus seems to have a talent for fixing things," she said to Bob. "Very useful." There was something in her tone that made Bob look between them curiously, but before he could comment, Luis Ortega approached with a golf club in his hands. "Marcus, right?" the pro said. "I grabbed this from the pro shop. It's a 7-iron, nothing fancy, but it's got good balance. Thought you might want to take a few swings while you're here." Marcus looked at the club, then at the growing group of people watching the interaction. "That's very kind, but I don't want to impose." "Nonsense," Luis said. "Any friend of the Whitmores is welcome here. Besides, I'm curious to see that swing you've been working on at Seaview." Claire's expression shifted, and Marcus caught a flash of something that might have been concern. This wasn't part of whatever script she'd been following. "Go ahead," she said, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "I'd love to see you play." Marcus accepted the club, feeling the familiar weight of good steel in his hands. The grip was worn smooth by countless swings, and the club head showed the honest scratches of regular use. He took a few practice swings, letting muscle memory take over. "Nice tempo," Luis observed. "Quiet hands, smooth transition. You've had some good instruction." "Just practice and YouTube videos," Marcus said, which got a chuckle from the growing audience. A caddy Marcus didn't know approached with a bucket of practice balls. "Thought you might need these, sir," he said, emphasizing the last word slightly. The courtesy title caught Marcus off guard. In his experience, respect was something you had to earn in places like this, usually over a long period of time. But these people were treating him like any other member. "Thank you," Marcus said, selecting a ball and setting up over it. He took his time, going through the pre-shot routine that years of practice had ingrained in him. Feet shoulder-width apart, weight evenly distributed, eyes focused on the back of the ball. The chatter around him faded into background noise. The swing felt pure from the moment he started his backswing. The club face met the ball with a solid click, and Marcus watched the white sphere arc high and straight, landing softly on the practice green about 150 yards away. "Beautiful shot," Luis said, and the small crowd murmured agreement. Marcus hit 2 more balls, both finding similar results. The familiar rhythm of golf helped settle his nerves, and for a moment he forgot about the complicated reasons he was here. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Claire asked. Her voice had lost its earlier edge and carried genuine curiosity. "Started when I was 12, Marcus said, handing the club back to Luis. "Worked summers at a municipal course in Detroit, cleaning carts and picking up range balls. The pro there let me play after hours in exchange for work." "That's the best way to learn," Luis said approvingly. "Hunger and hard work beat expensive lessons every time." Oliver, who had been watching from a distance, finally approached. "Well, that was unexpected. I had no idea Claire's staff was so talented." The word staff hit like a slap, clearly intended to remind everyone of Marcus's actual position. The casual friendliness of the past few minutes evaporated, replaced by the familiar tension of carefully maintained social boundaries. "Marcus isn't just staff," Evan said quietly, but firmly. He's our guest today," Claire interrupted, her voice carrying clearly across the practice area. "And he's welcome here." The statement seemed to surprise her as much as anyone else. Oliver's eyebrows went up, and Marcus saw several club members exchange glances. Claire had just publicly claimed him as a social equal, not an employee brought along for entertainment. "How progressive," Oliver said, his smile sharp as broken glass. "How human," Claire replied, meeting his gaze steadily. For a moment, the two of them stared at each other across the practice green. Marcus could feel the weight of family expectations and social pressures pressing down on the moment like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Then Luis clapped his hands together, breaking the tension. "Well, if we're going to get a round in, we should probably get started. Daylight's burning." The group began moving toward the first tee, but Marcus hung back. The last few minutes had shifted something fundamental in the dynamic between him and Claire, and he wasn't sure what it meant. Claire noticed his hesitation and slowed her pace until they were walking together, slightly behind the others. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "For what?" "For earlier, at the house, the way I invited you here." She kept her eyes straight ahead, but her voice was soft. "I had different intentions when this day started." Marcus considered her words carefully. "What kind of intentions?" Claire was quiet for so long that he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "The kind that would have made me feel superior and you feel small. The kind I'm not proud of." They had reached the first tee, where the rest of their group was waiting. Claire looked at him directly for the first time since her apology. "I'd like to try again," she said. "If you're willing." "Try what again?" "Being decent, being friends, maybe. Real friends, not whatever this was supposed to be." Marcus studied her face, looking for the performance he'd grown accustomed to seeing. Instead, he found something that looked like genuine regret mixed with hope. "Friends don't usually invite friends to country clubs to humiliate them," he said. Claire winced. "No, they don't, and I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry." The apology hung between them as they joined the others at the tee box. Evan was setting up for his first shot, his hands steadier than Marcus had seen them all day. Oliver was talking loudly to another foursome about market investments, his voice carrying the particular confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about money. "You going to be okay with this?" Claire asked, nodding toward Oliver. "I'll manage," Marcus said. "Question is, are you?" Claire looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" He's not going to let this go. Me being here, you defending me, it's going to cost you something. Maybe, Claire admitted. But maybe some things are worth the cost. Evan's shot sailed straight and true down the fairway. Not long, but perfectly placed. The young man turned with a grin that transformed his usually anxious face. Did you see that? He called to Marcus. Right down. The middle. Beautiful shot, Marcus replied, and meant it. As they climbed into their cart, Claire glanced over at him. You're really good with him. With people, I mean. You see what they need. Everyone needs to feel capable of something, Marcus said. Your brother's got plenty of strength. He just needed someone to help him find it. They drove down the cart path in comfortable silence, the earlier tension beginning to fade. The golf course stretched out around them, all rolling green hills and strategically placed water hazards. It was beautiful in the way that only money and careful planning could create. Can I ask you something? Claire said as they approached Evan's ball. Sure. Why did you agree to come today? You had to know it wasn't going to be simple. Marcus considered the question while he helped Evan select his next club. Why had he come? Pride, maybe? Curiosity? The refusal to let Claire's obvious setup go unchallenged. Because running away felt worse than staying, he said finally. Claire nodded slowly. I understand that feeling. As the afternoon wore on, something shifted between them. The performance fell away, replaced by actual conversation. Claire asked about his family, his plans, the books he liked to read. Marcus found himself talking more freely than he had in months, sharing stories about growing up in Detroit, his sister's job as a teacher, his dream of maybe opening his own business someday. What kind of business? Claire asked as they waited for Evan to line up a putt. Auto detailing, maybe, or general maintenance and repair. I'm good with my hands, and people always need things fixed. That sounds perfect for you, she said, and there was no condescension in her voice, just genuine interest. By the 9th hole, Marcus had almost forgotten the awkwardness of the day's beginning. Claire laughed at his stories, offered thoughtful questions, and treated him like what she'd claimed he was, a friend. But Oliver was still there, watching every interaction with calculating eyes. And Marcus knew that whatever was happening between him and Claire, it was going to come with a price that neither of them had fully considered yet. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when they finished their round. Other members were gathering on the clubhouse patio for afternoon drinks and conversation. The scene looked peaceful and welcoming, like something from a magazine about the good life. Marcus knew better than to trust appearances, especially in places where his presence wasn't entirely welcome. But for now, walking across the perfect grass with Claire beside him and Evan chatting happily about his improved putting, he could almost believe that the day might end as well as it had begun to unfold. That was before the camera started clicking. The clubhouse patio was alive with the gentle hum of Friday afternoon conversation. Members sat at wrought iron tables under cream-colored umbrellas, their voices mixing with the soft clink of ice in glasses and the distant sound of sprinklers on the course. Marcus followed Claire and Evan to a table near the edge of the terrace, where the view stretched across the 18th green toward the setting sun. This has been really nice, Evan said, settling into his chair with visible relief. I actually enjoyed myself today. That doesn't happen much at club events. Your putting really improved, Marcus said. You just needed to trust your read. Claire flagged down a server. What would everyone like? My treat. The casual generosity felt natural now, nothing like the sharp-edged performance from earlier. Marcus ordered an iced tea, Claire chose white wine, and Evan asked for a club sandwich along with his drink. I'm starving, Evan admitted. All that fresh air and actual exercise. As they waited for their order, Marcus noticed other members glancing in their direction. Most of the looks seemed curious rather than hostile, but he'd learned to stay alert in situations like this. Country clubs had their own social rules, and he was still figuring out exactly where he stood. "Marcus," Claire said, "tell Evan about the public range you mentioned. Maybe we could all go sometime." "Seaview Public Range," Marcus said. "It's nothing fancy, but it's got good bones. Old-style teaching setup, reasonable prices. They've got a pro there who really knows his stuff." "Sounds perfect," Evan said. "Somewhere I won't feel like everyone's watching every shot." "Everyone's watching every shot everywhere," Claire said with a laugh. "The trick is not caring what they see." Her comment carried more weight than the casual tone suggested. Marcus glanced around the patio and noticed Oliver at a table across the terrace, his phone out, seemingly taking photos of the scenic view. But something about the angle didn't look right. Before Marcus could say anything, Luis Ortega appeared at their table. "How'd the round go?" the pro asked. "Really well," Claire replied. Evan's pudding was much improved, and Marcus gave him some excellent tips. Luis nodded approvingly. "Good to hear. Marcus, I meant what I said earlier about stopping by our practice facility. You've got natural talent, and with some fine-tuning, you could really develop your game." "Thank you. That's very generous." "Not generous. Just good business. Golf needs more people who understand that it's about character as much as skill." Luis looked directly at Marcus as he said this, and Marcus understood that the pro was offering more than just golf lessons. After Luis walked away, Claire leaned forward slightly. "He likes you." "He's a good man," Marcus said. "You can tell a lot about a place by how the staff treat people." "And how do we measure up?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Better than I expected when the day started." Their food and drinks arrived, and for a while they simply enjoyed the peaceful afternoon. Evan talked about wanting to take up golf, more seriously, now that his anxiety about it was fading. Claire shared stories about learning to play as a child, when her main goal was hitting the ball hard enough to impress her father. "Did it work?" Marcus asked. "For a while. Until I got old enough to realize that impressing him required giving up parts of myself I wasn't willing to lose." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Rita Morales, the owner of Rita's Diner. She was carrying a tray of appetizers, looking slightly out of place in her casual clothes among the country club crowd. "Special delivery," Rita announced with a warm smile. "The club manager asked me to bring over some of our famous jalapeno poppers for the wine tasting event later." "Rita?" Claire stood up with genuine pleasure. "I didn't know you catered events here." "Just started recently. Turns out fancy people like good food just as much as everyone else." Rita's eyes landed on Marcus, and her face lit up with recognition. "Marcus Reed! What are you doing in a place like this?" Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm here as a guest today." "Well, look at that," Rita said, beaming. "Good for you. This man," she said to Claire and Evan, "is the best customer we've got. Always polite, always tips well, and he actually listens when you talk to him." "Rita," Marcus said, embarrassed by the praise. "Don't you Rita me. I'm proud of you." She turned back to Claire. "You picked a good one here. Don't let him get away." The comment hung in the air for a moment longer than comfortable. Rita seemed to realize what she'd implied and quickly busied herself arranging the appetizers. "I should get these to the kitchen," she said. "Y'all enjoy your afternoon." After she left, Claire was quiet for a moment. "She's right, you know, about the tipping. I asked around after you mentioned working at restaurants before this job. Everyone speaks well of you." "You asked around about me?" Claire looked embarrassed. "I wanted to understand who I was working with. I didn't know what to expect when Mother hired you." "And what did you find out?" "That you're exactly who you appear to be. Honest, hardworking, kind. No hidden agenda, no angle to work. She paused. It's rare in my world. Marcus was processing this when his attention was caught by movement across the patio. Oliver was still at his table, but now he was joined by two other men Marcus didn't recognize. All three had their phones out, and they kept glancing in his direction. Claire, Marcus said quietly, I think we might have a problem. She followed his gaze, and her expression darkened. What are they doing? Before Marcus could answer, Evan looked up from his sandwich. Oh no, Oliver's with the Hartwell brothers. Those guys love drama more than they love golf. What kind of drama? Marcus asked. Social media drama. They run that gossip account about local society stuff. Harbor Whispers or something like that. Claire's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. They're taking pictures. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with unwanted attention. He'd been careful all his life to avoid situations that might make him a target. And now, he was sitting in the middle of exactly the kind of scene that could follow him for years. Maybe we should go, he said quietly. No. Claire's voice was firm. We haven't done anything wrong. We're having drinks and conversation like any other group here. It's not about right and wrong, Marcus said. It's about how it looks. How does it look? Marcus gestured subtly toward the surrounding tables, where several conversations had grown quieter. Eyes that had been curious before now carried a different weight. Like I'm forgetting my place? He said simply. Claire's face flushed with anger. Your place is wherever you choose to sit. That's not how the world works, and you know it. Evan leaned forward. He's right, Claire. This could get ugly fast if those guys decide to make it a story. For the first time since her apology, Claire looked uncertain. Marcus could see her weighing her options, trying to calculate the cost of staying versus the cost of backing down. I'm tired of living my life based on what other people might think, she said finally. Even when those thoughts could hurt someone else? The question stopped her short. Marcus watched understanding dawn in her eyes as she realized that her rebellion against social expectations could end up causing him real damage. I didn't think of it that way, she admitted. Most people don't, but I have to. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of different realities settling between them. Marcus appreciated that Claire wanted to treat him as an equal, but equality was a luxury he couldn't always afford. So what do we do? Evan asked. Marcus was about to suggest they leave quietly when Luis Ortega appeared at their table again, this time carrying a folder. Sorry to interrupt, the pro said, but I wanted to give you this before you left. He handed Marcus a guest pass for the practice facility. Good for 6 months. Come by whenever you want to work on your game. The gesture was kind, but it also made their interaction more visible. Marcus saw Oliver's phone angle toward them again. Thank you, Marcus said, accepting the pass. This is very generous. Like I said, talent should be encouraged. Luis glanced around the patio, taking in the watching faces and raised phones. Regardless of what anyone else thinks about it. The pro's meaning was clear. He was publicly supporting Marcus's presence at the club, and his opinion carried weight here. Marcus felt a rush of gratitude mixed with anxiety about the spotlight it put on him. After Luis left, Claire reached across the table and briefly touched Marcus's hand. See? Not everyone here is small-minded. The touch was brief and probably meant as reassurance, but Marcus saw Oliver's phone flash in the periphery of his vision. What had been a private moment of friendship was now digital evidence of something that could be twisted into any narrative someone wanted to tell. Claire, he said quietly, we need to be careful. I'm tired of being careful. Then be smart instead. She looked at him for a long moment, then slowly pulled her hand back. You're right. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking about how this affects you. It affects you too, Marcus pointed out. Maybe more than me, in the long run. Evan finished the last of his sandwich and pushed his plate away. What if we just acted normal? Like we're not doing anything worth photographing? Smart kid, Marcus said. For the next 20 minutes, they kept their conversation light and general. They talked about the weather, the golf course, Evan's plans for college. Nothing that could be taken out of context or spun into scandal. But Marcus remained aware of the phones pointed in their direction and the careful way other members watched their table without appearing to stare. The easy camaraderie of earlier had been replaced by the exhausting vigilance of being constantly observed. When they finally decided to leave, Marcus felt both relief and disappointment. The day had shown him glimpses of a different kind of life, where he might be welcomed and respected for who he was, rather than judged by others' expectations. But it had also reminded him why he usually kept his distance from situations like this. The cost of crossing social boundaries was always higher for some people than others. As they walked back toward the car, Claire fell into step beside him. I'm sorry, she said. For all of it, the invitation, the setup, the photos. You didn't ask for any of this. No, Marcus agreed, but I chose to come anyway. Why? Marcus thought about the question as they reached the SUV. Why had he stayed when every instinct told him to leave? Why had he let himself hope that things might be different? Because running away from what might happen means you also run away from what could be good. Claire smiled, and for the first time all day, it reached her eyes. That's either very wise or very foolish. Probably both, Marcus said, holding open her car door. As they drove away from Green Harbor Country Club, Marcus caught a glimpse of Oliver and the Hartwell brothers still on the patio, their heads bent over their phones. Whatever story they were constructing from the afternoon's events would be online soon enough. But for now, in the quiet of the car with Claire humming softly and Evan commenting on the beautiful evening light, Marcus allowed himself to focus on what had been good about the day. The respect he'd earned from Luis and other members, the genuine friendship he'd found with Evan, and Claire's apology, which had felt real in a way that very little about her had before. Tomorrow would bring whatever consequences the photographs might create. Tonight, he would remember the sound of Claire's laugh when he'd told a story about his sister, and the pride in Evan's voice when he'd sunk a difficult putt. Some risks, Marcus thought as they drove through the gathering dusk, were worth taking, even when you knew they might cost you everything. The first sign of trouble came on Sunday morning. Marcus was making coffee in his small apartment kitchen when his phone buzzed with a text from his sister in Chicago. Did you really take a white girl to a country club? Because that's what the internet says. Marcus's stomach dropped. He opened his web browser and searched for his name, something he'd never had reason to do before. The third result made his blood run cold. Harbor Whispers, local heiress's surprising golf partner raises eyebrows, read the headline, accompanied by a photo that had clearly been taken with a zoom lens. It showed Claire reaching across the table to touch his hand, both of them smiling, looking for all the world like a couple on a romantic date. The article was carefully written to avoid outright accusations, but the implication was clear. It painted Marcus as an opportunistic employee taking advantage of his employer's daughter, and Claire as a naive rich girl being manipulated by someone beneath her station. The comments section was worse. Marcus scrolled through a handful before closing the browser, his hands shaking slightly. He'd seen enough to know that the story was spreading beyond the local gossip site. His phone rang. Claire's name appeared on the screen. Marcus, I'm so sorry, she said without preamble. I just saw it. This is all my fault. Have you talked to your family? Mother's locked herself in her study, Evan's trying to calm her down. And Oliver. Claire's voice trailed off. What about Oliver? He's here. He drove over first thing this morning with some story about damage control and family reputation. Marcus closed his eyes. Claire, I think we need to talk. Yes, can you come over? We need to figure out how to handle this. I don't think that's a good idea. More photos, more speculation. There was silence on the other end of the line. When Claire spoke again, her voice was small. You're right. Of course you're right. I keep making this worse. Meet me at Rita's diner in an hour, Marcus said. Public place, nothing romantic about it. We can talk without feeding the story. Rita's diner on Sunday morning was busy with the after-church crowd. The familiar smell of bacon and coffee provided a comforting backdrop as Marcus sat in a corner booth, waiting. He'd chosen a table where he could see the entire restaurant, an old habit that served him well in situations where he wasn't sure who might be watching. Claire arrived looking unlike herself. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. I ordered you coffee, Marcus said as she slid into the booth across from him. Thank you. She wrapped her hands around the mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. I've been thinking all morning about how to fix this. Maybe it can't be fixed, Marcus said gently. Maybe the best thing is for me to find another job and for you to go back to your regular life. Claire's head snapped up. Is that what you want? Marcus considered the question carefully. What he wanted and what was practical were two very different things. I want to be able to work without wondering if someone's going to twist it into something it's not. I want to help Evan with his anxiety without it becoming a scandal. I want to have a conversation with you without calculating how it might look to other people. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give right now. Rita appeared beside their table with a plate of her famous cinnamon rolls. On the house, she said, setting them down. You both look like you need some comfort food. Rita, I'm sorry if this causes problems for your business, Claire said. People associating you with all this? Rita snorted. Honey, I've been running this place for 15 years. If I worried about what every rich busybody thought, I'd have closed down long ago. She looked at Marcus. Besides, character matters more than gossip. Anyone with eyes can see you're good people. After Rita left, they sat in silence for a moment. Marcus broke off a piece of cinnamon roll, thinking about character and gossip and the way other people's opinions could shape your entire life. My mother wants to fire you, Claire said finally. Marcus nodded. He'd expected as much. Probably for the best. I told her no. Claire, I told her that if she fires you for something that was my idea and my fault, I'll move out and cut off all contact with the family. Claire's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the cost of the decision in her eyes. I meant it. Marcus stared at her. You can't do that. Your family, your inheritance, your whole life is tied up with them. My whole life has been tied up with what other people expect me to be. Maybe it's time to figure out who I actually am. Don't make that choice because of me. Don't blow up your life to prove a point. It's not about proving a point. Claire leaned forward, her voice intense. It's about doing what's right, and it's about not letting fear make my decisions anymore. Marcus felt a complex mix of gratitude, concern, and something else he wasn't ready to name. Claire was willing to sacrifice everything she'd known to defend him, but he wasn't sure either of them understood the full cost of that choice. What did Oliver say when you told your mother no? Claire's smile was grim. He said I was being emotional and that I'd come to my senses once I realized what I was throwing away. Then he suggested that you had somehow manipulated me into this position. And what did you say to that? I told him that if he couldn't see the difference between manipulation and friendship, then he wasn't someone I wanted in my life either. They were interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a call. The number was unfamiliar, but when he answered, he recognized the voice immediately. Marcus, this is Luis Ortega from Green Harbor. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the club's guest registry. Of course. What can I do for you? I wanted you to know that I saw the online story, and I've already spoken to the club manager about it. That kind of gossip has no place here, and several members have expressed their displeasure with how you were treated. Marcus was surprised. Thank you. That means a lot. I also wanted you to know that your guest pass is still valid, and you're welcome here anytime. Good character doesn't change based on internet gossip. After hanging up, Marcus shared the conversation with Claire. Her face brightened for the first time since she'd arrived. See? Not everyone believes the worst. Luis is a good man, but he's not everyone. Maybe everyone doesn't matter as much as we think they do. They finished their coffee and rolls while discussing practical next steps. Claire would talk to her mother again, try to smooth things over without backing down on keeping Marcus employed. Marcus would continue working, but would be extra careful about appearances until the story died down. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a starting point. As they prepared to leave, Claire reached across the table and briefly squeezed Marcus's hand. I know this is complicated, and I know I put you in an impossible position, but I'm glad you came to the club with us. I'm glad I got to see who you really are. Even with all the trouble it caused? Especially because of the trouble it caused. Trouble has a way of showing people's true character. That afternoon, Marcus drove to Seaview Public Range to clear his head. The familiar routine of hitting golf balls had always helped him think, and today, he needed the mental space that came with focusing on nothing but the simple mechanics of a good swing. He was surprised to find Evan already there, working his way through a bucket of balls with intense concentration. How'd you know I'd be here? Marcus asked as he approached. Lucky guess. Plus, Claire said you mentioned coming here to think. Evan's swing was noticeably smoother than it had been even a few days earlier. I've been practicing what you taught me about breathing and balance. It shows. Your tempo is much better. They hit balls in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic crack of club against ball providing a peaceful counterpoint to the chaos of the morning. Claire's really upset, Evan said eventually. She should be. This whole thing is a mess. She cares about you, you know, really cares. It's not just about proving a point or rebelling against Mother. Marcus paused in his practice routine. How can you tell? Because I've seen her rebel before. Usually, it's all flash and drama, designed to get maximum attention with minimum real consequence. This is different. She's willing to actually lose something important. Marcus considered this as he lined up his next shot. What about you? How do you feel about all this? Honestly, I think it's about time someone in our family chose what was right over what was expected. Evan's voice was quiet but firm. And I think you're good for us, for both of us. They were interrupted by the arrival of Coach Ortega, who was carrying his own bag of clubs. Great minds think alike, Luis said with a smile. Nothing like the range for clearing your head. The three of them spent the next hour hitting balls and talking about golf, carefully avoiding the subject of internet gossip and social complications. It felt normal and peaceful in a way that Marcus had almost forgotten was possible. As the sun began to set, they packed up their clubs and prepared to leave. Luis pulled Marcus aside as Evan loaded his bag into his car. I meant what I said on the phone, the pro said. Character matters more than gossip. Don't let other people's small-mindedness make you smaller. Thank you. That means more than you know. Good. And Marcus? That young lady defended you pretty fiercely when Oliver tried to cause trouble at the club today. Just thought you should know. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Oliver was at the club today? Came by around noon with some story about protecting the club's reputation. Started asking questions about your guest privileges and suggesting that maybe we should reconsider our policies. Luis's expression darkened. The club president told him that our guest policies were none of his business and that his attitude wasn't welcome. As Marcus drove home that evening, he thought about loyalty and courage and the way some people rose to challenges while others looked for ways to tear other people down. Claire had spent her day defending him to her family and Oliver. Evan had chosen to support them both despite the potential cost to his relationship with his mother. Luis had stood up for him at the club. Meanwhile, Marcus had spent most of the day thinking about running away. That realization sat heavily in his stomach as he pulled into the parking lot of his apartment complex. He'd been so focused on protecting himself from potential consequences that he'd missed the people who were actively trying to create a different outcome. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Mother agreed to let you stay. Barely, and with conditions, but it's something. Thank you for not giving up on us. Marcus stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Thank you for not giving up on me. It wasn't a solution to all their problems. The gossip would continue. Oliver would keep causing trouble, and the social pressures that had created this situation hadn't gone anywhere. But it was a beginning. A choice to try something different, to see if friendship and mutual respect could be stronger than fear and social expectations. Marcus climbed the stairs to his apartment, thinking about tomorrow. He would go to work, help Evan with his anxiety, treat Claire with the respect she deserved, and continue to conduct himself with dignity, regardless of who might be watching. Some risks were worth taking. Some friendships were worth defending. And sometimes, the most courageous thing you could do was simply refuse to let other people's limitations define your possibilities. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that sometimes follows a storm. Marcus dressed carefully for work, choosing clothes that struck the right balance between professional and approachable. He had no idea what to expect when he arrived at the Whitmore estate, but he was determined to handle whatever came with grace and dignity. Eleanor Whitmore was waiting for him in the kitchen when he arrived. Claire's mother was an elegant woman in her mid-50s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of posture that suggested years of finishing school and social expectations. "Mr. Reed," she said without preamble, "we need to talk." "Yes, ma'am." Eleanor studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "My daughter seems to think you're worth defending. I'm trying to understand why." Marcus chose his words carefully. "I can only speak to my own actions, Mrs. Whitmore. I've tried to be professional, respectful, and helpful to your family. And yet somehow you've ended up in the gossip pages." "Yes, ma'am, I regret that." "Do you regret going to the club?" The question was a test, and Marcus knew it. Eleanor was trying to determine whether he would throw Claire under the bus to save himself. "I regret that what was meant to be a pleasant afternoon became a source of stress for your family," he said. "But I don't regret being treated with kindness and respect." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Even when that treatment comes at a cost?" "Mrs. Whitmore, with respect, everything comes at a cost. The question is whether what you gain is worth what you pay." For the first time since the conversation began, Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "Claire said you were thoughtful. I'm beginning to see what she means." They were interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the kitchen stairs. Claire appeared, looking more like herself in a simple dress and light makeup, though there were shadows under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept well. "Mother, I thought we agreed." "We're having a conversation," Eleanor said calmly. "Adults do that sometimes when they need to understand each other." Claire looked between them uncertainly. "And do you understand each other?" "We're making progress," Eleanor said. She turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Reed, you may continue your employment here under the following conditions. No public appearances together that could be misconstrued. No personal relationship beyond professional courtesy. And if this situation escalates further, we will revisit this decision." The terms were reasonable, if limiting. Marcus nodded. "I understand." "Good. Now, I believe Evan is waiting for you in the garage. Something about practicing his golf swing before school." As Eleanor left the kitchen, Claire moved closer to Marcus. "I'm sorry about the conditions. I tried to argue, but—" "They're fair," Marcus interrupted. "Your mother is protecting her family. I respect that." "Even if it means we can't be friends?" Marcus considered the question. "We can be friends. We just have to be careful about how we show it." They were interrupted by Evan's voice calling from the garage. "Marcus, can you help me with something?" They found Evan standing next to his car with a golf club in his hands, taking slow practice swings in the empty bay. "I wanted to work on what you taught me before I lose it," Evan said. "But I think I'm doing something wrong." Marcus watched Evan's swing, noting the return of tension in his shoulders and hands. "You're trying too hard. Remember, the club does the work. You just guide it." As Marcus helped Evan find his rhythm again, Claire leaned against the workbench, watching them with a soft expression. "You're really good at this," she said. "Teaching, I mean. Making people believe they can do things they didn't think they could." "Everyone has more strength than they know," Marcus said. "Sometimes they just need someone to help them find it." "Is that what you did for me? At the club?" Marcus looked at her over Evan's shoulder as he adjusted the young man's grip. "You found your own strength. I just happened to be there when you decided to use it." The rest of the morning passed quietly. Marcus returned to his regular duties, maintaining the cars, running errands, handling the dozen small tasks that kept a large household running smoothly. The work felt familiar and grounding after the emotional intensity of the weekend, but he was aware of being watched more carefully than before. Eleanor appeared in doorways more often, observing his interactions with her children. Staff members who had previously ignored him now offered polite nods and careful smiles. The attention wasn't hostile, but it was constant. Marcus felt like he was performing his own life, conscious of every gesture and word in a way that was exhausting. By lunchtime, he was ready for a break from the scrutiny. He drove to Rita's diner, hoping for the casual normalcy of good food and straightforward conversation. Rita greeted him with a knowing smile. "How's your day going, honey? I imagine it's been interesting." "That's one word for it." "Well, you just sit yourself down and let me feed you something good. Nothing fixes stress like a proper meal." As Rita bustled around getting his order ready, Marcus noticed a familiar figure enter the diner. Oliver Dane scanned the room until his eyes landed on Marcus, then walked over with the confident stride of someone who believed he belonged everywhere. "Marcus, what a pleasant surprise." Oliver's smile was all sharp edges. "Mind if I join you? I think we should have a conversation." Marcus gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please." Oliver sat down and leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial level. "I wanted to talk to you man to man, without all the drama and emotions clouding things up." "All right." "Look, I like you. You seem like a decent guy who got caught up in something bigger than you expected, and I think we can help each other out here." Marcus waited for Oliver to continue, his expression neutral. The thing is, Claire's always been a little impulsive. She gets these ideas about rebelling against her background, making grand gestures to prove how independent she is, but it never lasts. Eventually, she comes back to reality and remembers who she is and what's expected of her. And what does that have to do with me? Well, right now, you're the symbol of her rebellion. She's defending you because it makes her feel like she's standing up for something important. But when the novelty wears off, you're going to be left holding the bag. Oliver paused as Rita brought Marcus's sandwich and iced tea. She shot Oliver a look that could have curdled milk, but said nothing. "What are you suggesting?" Marcus asked when Rita had left. "I'm suggesting that you could save everyone a lot of heartache by making the mature choice. Find another job, somewhere that's a better fit for someone with your background. I might even be able to help with that. I know people who are always looking for reliable help." Marcus took a bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly while he considered Oliver's proposal. On the surface, it wasn't entirely unreasonable. Oliver was probably right about Claire's pattern of rebellion and retreat. And there was some appeal to the idea of starting over somewhere else, without the complications that had built up around this situation. But there was something in Oliver's tone that made Marcus's skin crawl. The casual assumption that Marcus would be grateful for Oliver's help. The implication that he was too naive to understand his own situation. The suggestion that he was fundamentally out of place in the Whitmore family's world. "That's a generous offer," Marcus said finally, "but I'm satisfied with my current position." Oliver's smile faltered slightly. "Are you sure about that? Because things could get uncomfortable for you if this situation escalates. People talk, you know, and not all of them are as understanding as I am." "Is that a threat?" "It's a friendly warning, from someone who understands how these social dynamics work." Oliver leaned back in his chair. "I'm trying to help you here, Marcus. Don't let pride make you miss an opportunity to do the smart thing." Marcus set down his sandwich and looked directly at Oliver. "You know what the smart thing would be? The smart thing would be for you to accept that Claire has made her choice and move on with your life." "Her choice?" Oliver's laugh was cold. "Claire doesn't even know what she wants. She's confusing gratitude with something deeper, and you're either too inexperienced to see it or too opportunistic to care." "I think this conversation is over." Marcus started to stand, but Oliver reached across the table and grabbed his wrist. "Listen to me. Take your hand off me." Marcus's voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. Oliver released his grip immediately, glancing around to see if anyone had noticed the interaction. Marcus remained standing. "This isn't over," Oliver said, his friendly mask finally dropping completely. "Yes, it is," Marcus replied, and walked out of the diner. The encounter with Oliver left Marcus feeling unsettled for the rest of the afternoon. He'd known that Claire's decision to defend him would have consequences, but he was beginning to understand the full scope of the forces arrayed against them. When he returned to the estate, he found Claire and Evan on the back terrace, sharing a late lunch and what looked like a serious conversation. They looked up as he approached, and Claire's face immediately showed concern. "You look upset," she said. "What happened?" Marcus hesitated, unsure how much to share. The last thing he wanted was to create more drama, or put Claire in a position where she felt she had to defend him again. "I ran into Oliver at lunch," he said carefully. "He wanted to have a conversation." "What kind of conversation?" Evan asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "The kind where he offered to help me find employment somewhere else, for everyone's good." Claire's face flushed with anger. "He has no right." "He has every right to express his opinion," Marcus interrupted. "But I have every right to ignore it." What did you tell him? I told him I was satisfied with my current position. Claire smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all day. Good. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself thinking about permanence and change, about the difference between fighting for something because it was right and fighting for something because it felt good. Claire had stood up for him with her family, but Oliver wasn't wrong about her history of rebellion and retreat. The question was whether what was happening between them was another phase she would grow out of, or something that might actually last. That evening, as Marcus prepared to leave for the day, Claire caught up with him by his car. I wanted to thank you, she said, for staying, for putting up with all of this, for not letting Oliver intimidate you. I don't intimidate easily. I'm starting to figure that out. She paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Marcus, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you think this is worth it? All the complications, all the gossip, all the pressure from people like Oliver? Do you think what we're building here is worth fighting for? Marcus considered the question carefully. It was the same question he'd been asking himself all day. I think, he said finally, that most things worth having require some amount of fighting. The question isn't whether it's worth fighting for. The question is whether you're willing to keep fighting when it gets harder. Claire nodded slowly. I am. Willing to keep fighting, I mean. Even when your mother sets conditions and Oliver makes threats and people you've known all your life start treating you differently? Especially then. Marcus smiled. Then yes, I think it's worth it. As he drove home that evening, Marcus thought about courage and commitment and the way that standing up for what was right often required standing up to people you cared about. Claire had done that today with her mother. Evan had done it by supporting them both despite the potential cost to his family relationships. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Oliver wouldn't give up easily, and the social pressures that had created this situation were still firmly in place. But for the first time since the weekend, Marcus felt optimistic about their chances. Some friendships were worth the fight. Some principles were worth defending. And sometimes, the most important battles were the ones that helped you discover who you really were when everything else was stripped away. The story was far from over, but Marcus was beginning to believe it might have a happy ending after all.